Have you ever thought about what is going on in your brain when you wake up, when you brush, when you go to work, when you are arguing with your boss, when you're trying to get more work done from your colleagues, from your subordinates, when you're trying to get a new deal done? What is going on in your brain? This is your brain. This is where it all starts. This is where it all ends. Every thought, every emotion, every idea that you've ever had comes from this. The brain is arbitrarily divided into parts called lobes. Four lobes: frontal, parietal, temporal, occipital. What do they do? Occipital, back of your head, helps you see. It is the camera system of the brain. The parietal at the sides, they are the antenna. It tells you where you are in your three-dimensional space. Temporal, below, behind your ear, it can help you hear things, and it is also where your emotions are stored and where your long-term memories are stored. And frontal, the most important, is the most evolved part of the brain. This is the part of the brain that actually makes us human, that makes you think and act logically and have a personality. All of that is happening in the frontal brain. You take out the frontal brain and you are as good as a reptile or a monkey. Worse than a monkey, because monkeys have also got a pretty well developed frontal brain. So this part of the brain, the old part, is called as the reptilian brain. If you've heard of this, great. This is also called as the limbic system. The limbic system or the reptilian brain lives through a dopamine loop. You chase after food because it gives you dopamine. You chase after sex because it gives you dopamine. It is a dopamine loop. In fact, there is a very nice term for this called as the hedonic treadmill. The hedonic treadmill is quite simply the treadmill of dopamine. It is a treadmill that gets people hooked to acting in a particular way, and you are constantly running on it, chasing dopamine. That is actually the neuroscience of primitive decision making. Unfortunately, or fortunately, we have moved beyond this primitive dopamine loops. Today, what is the neuroscience of decision making? Certain things don't change. Just because we now have a prefrontal cortex does not mean that the old limbic system is gone. It is still very much there. So, all those previous habits that we have picked up, all those previous dopamine loops that you have picked up still exist. Plus, we also have all the things that the prefrontal cortex is capable of, which is planning, calculation. We can now have empathy. We now have the ability to think about the future. We now have the ability to reason. All these things are getting added on top of what the limbic system wants. How do we make a decision? First of all, in order to make a decision, we need input. What are we making a decision on? What are we deciding? So, for that, we need information. So, how does information come into the brain? Through the senses. How does senses enter the brain? It will only enter the brain if we have our five senses open. So we are seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, smelling. And all these senses will first go to the limbic system. And after it has gone to the limbic system, then it will enter our prefrontal cortex. Now, what is the significance of what I just said? Our limbic system is aware of around 90% more things than what the prefrontal cortex is aware of. Because between the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system is a filter called attention. What we pay attention to decides ultimately what we do. That seems logical. You cannot do something that you are not paying attention to. If I tell you to play a piano and your attention is not on the piano, you won't even know that there is a piano next to you. So, how can you play it? Simply put, pay attention to what you're doing for information to go in. Across the board, whatever it is that you're doing, our brain actually has only two resources. These are the two currencies that we play with. Time and attention are the two resources that you are spending. And time does not equals attention. It doesn't mean that if you've studied something for 2 hours, doesn't mean that you've paid attention for 2 hours. And this is a common mistake that we all do. When I say, I remember that as a student, I would sometimes sit down and say that I will study for 8 hours. But that in that 8 hours of time, how much attention am I paying? Because it is ultimately attention that decides how much of that information enters my brain. And this relation is what concentration is. So the more I'm concentrating, what I'm actually saying is that I am concentrating attention to a smaller unit of time. So if you have the ability to concentrate, you are actually spending more attention and you are saving time. Whereas if you don't have the ability to concentrate, your attention is spread out across multiple things, but then the time that you waste or spend is also more. So I am somebody who does both. At certain points, I am concentrating because I want to be able to analyze a topic very quickly. So then all of my attention is on that topic for 10, 15, 20 minutes. But on the other flip side, I would sometimes pay what is called as low attention, which is background attention. I will just leave a thought going on in the background. I will keep picking it up, dropping it, picking it up, dropping it, because I know that I want to understand this over a period of time. So both kinds of attention are absolutely valid. It's called as high attention or concentration, or low attention or background attention. And both are legitimate ways of learning. And you don't have to give high attention to everything. So both of these, both time and attention, are actually currencies. Because if you think about it, you pay attention. Attention is a currency. Everybody wants your attention. In fact, more than your time, they want your attention. Netflix wants your attention. YouTube wants your attention. I want your attention. Your parents want your attention. Everybody wants your attention, and you have limited attention to pay. And so you have to be very stingy with it to understand where are you spending it. Now that we've talked of attention, let's talk of time. How does the brain perceive time? We have all been very familiar with time. We all know time flows, time cannot go back, you only have one life, there is, time is precious and all of that. But did you know that the same 1 hour is not the same for two people because of the amount of attention that you are paying it? This is a tricky concept. But when we talk of productivity, we cannot talk of productivity without talking about this. The amount of attention you pay actually stretches time out. So if you are not paying attention, time can go by very quickly. Whereas the more attention you pay, the slower time goes. And this is, of course, the whole relativity of Einstein's theory. This is about, when you're sitting on a hot stove, time goes slowly, all of that. It is because when you're sitting on a hot stove, what is happening? Right? So suppose if this is a hot stove and this is fire, every second that fire is sending signals to the nerves. Those nerves are sending signals to your brain, and the brain is forced to pay attention to what is happening. And so, if you are aware of every second, the literal time between every second is more. Whereas if you are not aware of it, it is much lesser. And this brings me to what somebody asked about the Pomodoro technique. The Pomodoro technique says that in order to be more productive or in order to have more time per day, you divide your day not into one day or not even into 1 hour, but you divide it into much smaller slots of around 20 minutes. Now, the 20 minute is an abstract number. You can divide it into 15 minutes, you can divide it into 45 minutes, but try to understand that every unit will be felt. Okay? So if you have a 20-minute time slot to do one task, then you will be aware that this is something to be completed within 20 minutes. And then as soon as the 20 minutes is done, there will be an alarm that will bring your attention to the fact that that 20 minutes is over. If that alarm is not there, then your attention will not go to that time, and so time will again dissolve. So, time is literally like a sand castle in front of you that you have to create, and unless you're paying attention, the wave will come and take it all away. Now, coming to how the brain controls attention. When I say control attention, what I mean is that attention is like a torch. Okay, so imagine there is a torch, and the torch is giving light, and this is the light of that torch. Can you imagine it? The rest of the room is dark, and there is only one ball of light, one circle of light that you can see. This is literally your reality. Everything that is in this cone of light is everything that your prefrontal cortex is perceiving. You can turn the torch anywhere, and then your reality will change. That becomes your reality for that much time.